great if we can start with perhaps a brief introduction to Arvato and obviously ATC, sort of the presence in the data center logistics space. And I guess you could perhaps give us a bit of an explanation of the acquisition of ATC by Arvato as well. Yeah, if you can just sort of give us setting the scene, if you like.
Since around 2012, ATC has provided last mile services to some of the global data center operators, beginning in Dublin, working with one of the first hyperscalers who entered Ireland. Those services typically involved transportation of server racks, installation in the data centers, and some value-added services, including connecting them into the network, as well as managing waste and some of the other associated tasks. Over the years, we expanded that service, going from Dublin to Frankfurt to London to Amsterdam, and in the last 5 years have extended to over 20 cities across 16 European countries. Mainly the same set of services, transportation, rack delivery, etc. In approximately 2024, we realized as ATC that we were hitting a cap with what we could do in Europe. And we began to evaluate what our strategic options were. One of the options we considered was to become part of a larger company. That's when the acquisition discussion with Arvato kicked off in earnest. And over the course of 6 to 9 months, we considered how our services would match with those of Arvato, how the culture between the two companies and the customer focus would be compatible. And ultimately, we decided in mid-2024 that we were going to proceed with that. So at the start of this year, we came together as one company. We've been going through the integration process, mostly been positive. Of course, a couple of things on both sides that we didn't realize about each other. None of them were showstoppers, and we had far more in common than we had differences between us, which was very reassuring. Towards the end of 2025 now, we see that we have a complementary set of services for global data center operators. Linking in with the Arvato world, operating large supply chain infrastructure like warehouses, complex systems for storage of equipment, pick, pack, ship, services including customs, so importer of record, exporter of record, all of those bolted on very nicely to what ATC provided in the last mile services space. So overall, it's a more compelling solution for our shared customers. And on top of that, we leveraged Arvato's global scale to expand outside Europe. In July this year, we began our first operations in the US. In November, we extended that to a second city, and we're currently in the planning phases for GCC countries in the Middle East and Australia. So overall, the promise of the acquisition is very much fulfilled, and it's launched a platform that we'll build on over the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, it'd be good to follow up then. You say you entered or are entering the US data center logistics market. I guess it'd be good to understand, you've obviously explained the sort of power of the two organizations is the main reason, but was there a particular reason for the timing? Is it just because it's a rapidly expanding like all data center markets, and obviously it's a big market? And I guess what distinguishes you in what I guess is quite a competitive landscape over there?
Mm-hmm. Thinking of our entry into the US, there were a couple of drivers for this. The first was an invitation from one of our largest customers to extend our set of services from Europe to the US and to support some new regions that they were establishing. Some of the challenges they faced in the US, for the most part, was capacity. So as they began to open in new regions, how to bring existing partners to those regions, add additional capacity and add additional services. So for us, that kicked off in Des Moines in Iowa, probably not a city that you would immediately associate with data centers and somewhat off the beaten track. In the last 4 months, we've grown the team from 0 to nearly 40. So it's a pretty strong ramp up. Our second and third regions, so the second is Milwaukee, again, a new region for one of our largest customers, similar challenges, looking to bring services at the scale that they need. And then our third one will be Atlanta in Georgia. We're not stopping there. We do have 2 or 3 other options under consideration at the moment. But as always, we're trying to manage adding capacity with quality assurance at the same time so that our growth doesn't overextend and risk the quality levels we're very proud of.
And in terms of those locations, is it one large hyperscale customer that's driving all those, or are there more? I understand you probably can't share names, but just what's driving those locations? Is it one customer or more than one customer, and further expansion? What will that rely on, if you like?
As we look at the footprint of some of the data center operators, there are a lot of cities that are in common, and that's typically driven by the availability of power, space, and a good workforce. As we open up in the US, in some of the cities we've gone to, they are single customer sites. So our first one in Des Moines was to service our launch customer there. They're the only one in that region. But as we look to Milwaukee, Chicago, Atlanta, etc., those sites are suitable for more than one customer. We are in conversations about extending to most of the hyperscalers over time in the US.
Okay, and you may or may not know what's driving those data center locations for your customers. I mean, is it safe to assume that it's AI that they're focusing on, or are they more general purpose data center facilities? Do you happen to know what's going on with them?
We do. So looking at the expansion across the US for the data center operators, a huge driver is the rollout of AI. One of the key things that they need is the availability of power. That's now the major blocker across the world on where to put data centers, and that is driving data centers out into new regions. So our second site in the US, which will be in Milwaukee, that is exclusively an AI data center, and that's happening on a scale that we haven't seen before.
Okay, and I know, I suspect related to that, innovation is very important to yourselves and your customers. And I think you're supplying for the hyperscale client in Des Moines and maybe elsewhere, liquid cooled server racks, for example. Just your thoughts as to what innovations, including those that you're looking at or you're already implementing for your customers.
In the way we deliver our services for our customers, a couple of things matter very, very much. So the first two are safety and security. Moving server racks, and in particular, as we now have to work with racks that are liquid cooled, the safety of our teams is super important. So that's something we put a lot of emphasis on. It does open up some scope for innovation in how we deliver the service. So we've been testing out robotic solutions for the movement of server racks. Some of these are human controlled, some will be AI in the very, very near future. One of the big things that does is it reduces the physical impact on people as they move server equipment around data centers, and that reduces risk of injury, but it also speeds up and guarantees delivery times, which keeps our SLAs.
Okay, and then more generally, you mentioned obviously, as well as the States, you're looking, I think, was it the Middle East? So just anything you can share as to, clearly you've got some plans to expand further in the US, but where else are you looking to grow the business?
In the last few months, we've seen significant announcements from global tech companies about expansion of their data center footprint in the Middle East. One of the reasons for this is a recent trade deal between the US and those countries and the ability to export GPU chips for AI into the Middle East. There is a large availability of power and it's cost effective. So we've seen announcements in the billions of dollars and for hundreds of megawatts of data center capacity to be added. So for us, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and in particular Dubai are target areas. And as we look further afield, our next jump mid next year will be to Australia and New Zealand.
Okay, and in terms of that expansion, is it driven? entirely by customers? So a customer says, we're opening a data center here, we want you to support us, or some of your plans to expand, just you think it's important to have a presence in a particular location because you can see, as you mentioned, with the Middle East, and I suspect with Australia, that the market is going to be growing, and therefore it's important that you're there to be there when people require the services that you're offering. Just the balance, I suppose, of what's customer driven and what's more, I won't say speculative, but more, you're doing it because you think it's a good idea independent of customers.
As we think about expanding our footprint, usually in partnership with our clients, there's a couple of factors that we consider. The first is it's very important for the global tech companies that they have a global service, but local execution of that. So typically we look at their roadmap 2 to 3 years out, and we decide which areas are the priority for us. And we follow their lead very much and work in partnership in choosing where to open. Typically, we try to have our services ready in a region 6 to 8 months before the data center opens. That's when you begin to get early site access and equipment arrives. That's when our teams get to work. Throughout the life cycle of a data center, there's a steady stream of activity, and somewhere between 3 to 5 years, then the refresh cycle begins. That's where the equipment that went in is approaching the end of its useful economic life, and so it gets retired, and then the cycle begins again with new equipment being reinstalled. So when we open in a region, it's not project based. It's typically a permanent thing, and that becomes a permanent expansion of our footprint.
And I'd just be interested in how competitive is this? I mean, it's obviously quite a specialist area, data center logistics, I guess, but is it a competitive field, or bearing in mind the expansion of the data center, global data center sort of footprint, is there enough business out there for everyone? Just your thoughts as to how competitive or not the market might be.
Over the last few years, we've seen a lot of attention focused on logistic services for data centers. Most of the global top 10 have teams now dedicated to this. In our world, we have a particular niche, which is working at and inside the data centers. Typically, that involves a level of care and attention which is hard to replicate. So we feel very strongly that we have a competitive advantage. It's part of our team culture, the way we work closely with our customers to deliver that service. So we feel confident that even though there's more attention on the sector, we still have a compelling and competitive offer.
And maybe just in finishing, your thoughts, I suppose, as the future. I mean, clearly AI is sort of fueling some significant data expansion across the world. Are you very excited by the opportunity that there is for ATC and Arvato? Is it just sort of business as usual, but obviously you're growing, or do you think there's a sort of almost seismic shift that you could make in terms of the size of your operation to meet the demands of this rapidly expanding sector?
Over the last few years, we've seen a significant increase in volumes with our data center customers. It's far above the wave that we saw at the outbreak of the COVID pandemic, when there was a shift to remote working. That drove a huge amount of activity and on very compressed timelines. In the last year or so, with the global phenomenon that is AI, we've seen a very steady increase in demand, and in conversations with our customers, we see that the next 2 to 3 years will be busier than ever. So overall, we're excited about the years ahead. It will result in a very significant expansion of our business, both in volume in the existing countries where we work, but also in opening and bringing our services to new countries. So all in, it's a very exciting time to be in the industry. It's an exciting time to have a range of services that we feel are very compelling to our customers, and we're looking forward to the challenge ahead.
Keith, it's been great to chat, and thank you so much for sharing so many great insights into what's going on at ATC and Arvato, and thoughts about the industry more generally. So appreciate your time.